here to talk about was the right way to use this. So email, let's kind of talk about that first. What's the advantage of an email?
Documentation.
Documentation,
Yes.
absolutely.
It's quick.
It's quick, kind of like a text, but you can get a little more verbose in it. What else?
Multiple parties.
Yes.
Absolutely. We can get multiple people involved. I don't have to call up. That, take some time. I guess, what are the disadvantages of an email?
You mean tone deaf sometimes?
And what do you mean by tone deaf?
Well, misinterpretation, people can read it.
Yeah, they can take it the wrong way. Our CFO at FMI, she's also kind of, we'll call her Debbie Downer. Sometimes she'll communicate and say, you guys are not sending in your expense reports right, they don't have the right amount of detail, you need to improve it. Well, she's sending this to 200 people. Now, I can assure you, as one of the managers of FMI, that there is maybe, I know I'm doing it right, because I'm literally doing it but when I get that email, I kind of get a little miffed. I go, why is she sending this out? I think I'm doing it right. This pisses me off. On the other hand, there's probably a handful of folks.
Right.
But are they tone deaf in the sense that they go, yeah, boy, I guess I don't have to worry about it. Denise didn't come at me and tell me I'm doing it wrong. Would that have been better handled, the one-on-one, where she picks up the phone and says, hey, Steve, you're not doing your expense report right?
She doesn't want to call them out.
Exactly. It's
Passive-aggressive.
passive-aggressive. My mother-in-law, my wife, I'm glad she's not here, she'd love this discussion. Actually, she would agree with me. But my mother-in-law is classic passive-aggressive. To the point when we're driving down the road and she's in the back seat, my wife's in the front seat, she'll say, Liz, can you tell Greg to turn down the air? And I'm in the front seat of the car driving. Now, after 10 years, I've gotten to the point where I will not respond until my wife asks me, only because it just annoys me. So I will just keep driving, and then Liz will go, Greg, can you turn down the air for my mom? Okay. Yes, I'm being petty, I get it. But my point is, this passive-aggressive, there are folks that don't like conflict, that would just as soon go through intermediaries and take that path of least resistance. Folks, you might go, yeah, that's not me. But the point is, this is all about personal reflection. If you do that, or any of the things we're going to be talking about today, this is the behavioral check to go, that may not be working for you. So, what about, let's talk about the phone. That's another vehicle we could use. We could communicate by the phone. Why is that good?
Just have a better understanding of how the person feels when you're talking to them, because you can tell by their emotions.
I'll push back on that a little bit. Do you get all the emotions?
No.
Right, because they could be steaming on the other end, and if they're if they are passive aggressive or just passive, they may shut down. So you may, if you are tone deaf to that, you may go, hey, they heard me. I just bull-nosed my way through this thing and got my point.
For the inflections of the words and how they're actually speaking.
Exactly. So if they come back and go, fine.
Yeah, it's never good.
Yeah. I've heard that a few times in my life.
But
Yes, sir.
But it's right on, theoretically, it's in real time. You had an issue, you call them right when it's happening.
That's a good thing.
Rather than waiting for a response.
Right, yeah, send the email, maybe you send it on Friday, but they don't check their email till Monday or Tuesday, or they're on vacation. Once again, you got that now, and we're at least having this. Whether it's good or bad, we're having that dialogue. What else, when it comes to using the phone, there's a reaction that I want you to think about for a moment. This is more customer service, but if Darcy called me right now on my phone, what comes up on my screen?
Queen.
Exactly. Queen Darcy, the QD. No. It would say, Darcy, her phone number.
Blocked.
And, there is something funny to this, though, because the question now becomes, that knee-jerk reaction before I press the either answer button or don't answer button, there's a knee-jerk reaction that happens. It's, oh crap, it's Darcy. Or, oh, it's Darcy. Isn't that interesting? Mm-hmm. Everyone in here does it. Hell, I've watched a few of you take phone calls this morning, and I watched your reaction when you look at your phone. You go, oh, son of a gun." Why does that occur?
You know how the conversation's gonna go sometimes?
There's a knee-jerk reaction because we call it muscle memory, and we're right next to this fitness center. I watch those videos at night. If you remember that old P90X, the videos for selling P90X, I didn't watch the videos, I just watched the infomercial. But it talked about muscle memory. You develop this muscle memory, and that's because you're conditioned. Every time this sub calls me, that's a problem. So, transport yourself to your customer's office right now. You're a little kind of a fly on the wall. And I call them with your cell phone. What's their reaction when you call your customer? Is it, oh crap, it's that guy from Benning? Or is it, oh, it's Benning? That's something I really want you to think about, because that sets the tone when we start having these phone conversations, these preconceived notions. You know, do I just hit send to voicemail because I don't want to talk to them? Now we're back to one-sided communication because I'm getting a voicemail. Now, how do you get over that hurdle? And this is going to sound weird, but if you think, boy, every time I call this person, it's a fight or a conflict, one technique you might employ is start calling customers with good news. You know, get them conditioned to where, hey, I'm not calling you to tell you there's a delay, an issue, a change order, or anything. Literally put on your to-do list, call a customer for no reason. Now I'm not call up and say, hey, what's you doing? That's not what I'm referring to. It would be funny to watch some of you do that, I tell you. However, hey, Mr. Publix, I just want to let you know we just poured the footings today. They're waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? Because that's the way it usually works. Hey, just want to let you know, have a great afternoon, man. Click. Start changing that. It doesn't happen overnight, folks. But if you have that reaction, or you think people have that reaction, because I only call when there's bad news. And maybe that's also for folks, you know, in the office. You know, I only hear from accounting. I only hear from Rice. I only hear from Channing. I only hear from Darcy when poop's hitting the wall. Well, they need to change, and that's not what we want. We want it to be, how you doing? What can I do to help you? And it starts to change this. Doesn't happen overnight, but it changes over time. Here's my favorite form of communication, meetings. Yep, meetings are structured forms of communication. So, what's the good thing about meetings?
They have breaks.
Amen. They have Chick-fil-A and drinks. What are the, let's maybe go to the negative side of this. What are the bad things about meetings?
Not enough breaks.
Amen.
He hasn't smoked in a while.
Here's the, we're going to do this again when we're together, but all meetings should have a PAL. I like to talk in acronyms, mainly because I'm not that smart, and it helps me kind of remember things. It's real simple. Purpose, agenda, and limits. Do your meetings have a PAL? First question asked, why are we having this meeting? What's the purpose of it? If we can't answer that, don't have the meeting. That's when you go, could this have been handled by a phone call? Could this have been handled by an email? Meetings are what I would say contagious. And in my own organization, trust me, I have a couple folks that go, let's have a meeting. We're in a meeting, and then they'll say, I think we need to have a meeting on that. And they go, why? You know, not to mention, I'm in 5 different offices, and we're across 3 different time zones. So the thought of like even getting into a meeting with some of these folks, and well, we can't do it at 2 o'clock because that's, you know, lunchtime, mountain time. My point is, ask yourself, could this have been handled another way? Purpose. We're here today to resolve all the change orders on the Publix project. Done. Agenda. Realistic agendas. You know, I love the meetings that say, we'll be here from 2 o'clock till question mark, question mark, question mark. Hey, thanks for that broad brush so I can plan my day out. Now, we're going to be here to here. Now, Do we have too much in an hour block? Well, we're going to cover these 17 points and 18 subpoints in an hour. Well, you know it's not going to work. So that goes back to the first one. What's the purpose of this meeting? Are we going to be able to accomplish that in 1 hour? And then limits. That's not just limits on time, but also limits on the people. Once again, we like to get everyone together. It makes us feel good to see, all the trades and all the people. This doesn't mean we shouldn't have meetings, but we need to ask ourselves, do I have the right people there? How many have been in a meeting recently, and at the end of the meeting you said, why was I here? I don't even know why I was here. I was never called upon, no one asked me a question, and I feel completely not enriched because of that. Those are all the things. Now, some of you are victims of meetings because you have to show up, but you also lead meetings. And ask yourself, the PAL, do we have that? Do we do it appropriately? We could go into other ones. We kind of beat the text message to death. We could talk about letters, albeit I don't know how many letters we're maybe sending anymore, but that is a form of communication. Darcy, you said something at your table, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you guys were saying something in the wrap-up, and if you could talk about that just for a moment.
We were comparing telephone calls with emails, and we said the telephone calls were good to invite dialogue, and the emails often invited a monologue. So if you need to get some input from somebody else, a phone is just, and sometimes it's more efficient to get somebody on the phone if you need that dialogue, as opposed to creating a monologue situation with an email.
That's a great example. Dialogue versus monologue. Information versus collaboration. And sometimes we'll use that because we want to shut down the receiver. Meaning, let's do this via email so I don't get the reaction. And that's bad. Now, some of you, based on your personalities that we'll do in a little bit, know if you're conflict averse or you have no problem confronting controversy and conflict. But that could also describe what techniques you use in terms of communication. All I'm going to say to you is, does that work for you? Are you going, man, I just don't seem to have happy customers. I don't have great teams. I don't feel like I'm moving up in the organization. I don't feel like my project is successful. The biggest thing then comes is this the right way? Or should I adjust my personality? Or a leopard can't change its stripes, but maybe it's some modification.
One form of communication that you didn't mention was secondhand communication.
Give me an example of that.
Telling someone something to tell someone else.
Playing phones.
Yeah, that's a great example, my friend. It's the telephone game. I whisper something to him, and by the time it gets to the guy all the way in the back, the sentence doesn't even sound like that. Now, it goes a little bit back to the what you hear versus what was said. And you kind of cut corners. You'll say, hey, I need you to be done next Friday. So I do tell this guy a deadline. But then you tell the next guy, hey, yeah, he just said you need to be done next week. And then pretty soon you get down, it's like, he said, yeah, you need to be done, but he didn't really give me a deadline. So pretty soon we've really lost what the thing is. Now the whole thing is you go, but I told you. No, you told me through some broken circuit. So who's responsible? The sender or that final person? The answer is probably is blame to be cast all around. Where you should be going back and saying, hey, someone told me, one of my subs told me that you needed to be done next week. Oh yeah, I'm glad you came to me. We have an inspection. You need to be done by Monday. Wow. So that's a great example. We do that once again because it's expedient. It's quick. I can easily go to you and say, I don't have time, so can you run and go? You're going to run by the electrician's trailer. Can you just tell him to show up next Tuesday? Once again, if we default to that, is that working for us? I gave a couple examples up here, different types of communication styles, all the way down to what I would say rating. And when I say rating, the rating simply comes down to effectiveness. Obviously there's purposes and reasons for using any of these. For instance, one-on-one conversation. I don't know how many people are in the room right now, but let's say 25 people. would you all say that, let's say we didn't do a 25-person training, but we did one-on-one training, to where you sat with me for a day, but it was just me and this guy, then me and this guy. How effective would that be? Well, you would probably, the effectiveness would be very high because I could see if your body language is there, if you're understanding. You might be shy, so you don't ask questions, but in one-on-one, we just have a conversation. Now, on the other hand, I would probably go to the top of this building and jump off of it if I had to teach this 25 times. It wouldn't be cost-effective or efficient, but it would be effective in the communication style. Versus the bottom, the news crawl, the item on the bottom of the screen. You know, like yesterday, I was sitting in the hotel. I stayed at the Renaissance down by the airport for that peer group meeting, and I was eating my breakfast, and they had the news TV up on the screen. I couldn't see what channel it was, but on the bottom of the screen it said, "Ships attacked in the Persian Gulf." And I'm kind of like, okay, did I miss something here? What happened? My point is that, you know, there's no two-way communication there, and in fact, it's one of the least effective ways because it's 10 words. It's like I didn't kick the ball. You know, what does that mean? I don't get to ask questions. I don't get to have any interaction. But that's the effectiveness. So the 7 C's of communication. When we talk about the 7 C's, and I'm going to ask you to do kind of some personal reflection in just a moment, but the first one being clarity. How clear are you personally when sending a message? Do you do like Jim and say, hey, I just need to be done in the next week or so? It couldn't be any more nebulous than that. Or do you say you need to be done by next Friday at noon, because that's when we're getting ready for an inspection? Conciseness, using the least possible words to get your message across. You know, the old adage that I have given people is, do people ask you the time, but you tell them how the watch works? You know, once again, just the facts, ma'am. Tell me what that looks like. Correct. Are you correct in your information? Do you give accurate data and assessments? Completeness. All the facts. You know, not selective information, but all the facts that give people the right data to make that information or decision. Consideration. You know, do I understand my audience? You know, I'm going to be talking to different people with different motivations like we talked about before. Concrete, being specific. For instance, I want to lose weight. Okay. Then there's the question of, I want to lose 25 pounds. You might say, that's a little light, Greg, but you need to go a little higher than that. That's fine. But once again, am I vague, or do I have a definitive concrete target? And then lastly, just simple courtesy, which goes back to, we'll call it the Anthony Zito factor. I'm just teasing. The idea of guys, I'm teasing. My point is, yeah, do we have just simple common courtesy with people? And, you know, it was funny, a couple of years ago, I actually did some work. I went to France. And people, like, every time I was telling them, like, where are you heading to? I'm going to France. Oh, God. The people over there are just so rude. And then I got there, and I was kind of delightfully surprised. Now, there was a difference. The people were direct. They weren't rude. You know, you asked them, they didn't, you know, kind of weren't all warm and fluffy, but they're like, oh, yeah, the museum's over there. That was it. But I think there's a difference. We also talk common courtesy. You know, are you kind of warm? Do you have that, you know, good feel? Or do you kind of almost present an image of you're not ready to listen, you're not ready to be talked to? You know, my one sister, she's that, she hasn't had her cup of coffee in the morning, you just don't talk to Patty. That's my sister. It's like, you know, so you know. My other sister, on the other hand, is Chatty Cathy. So they are like fire and ice. They're next door neighbors. And so my sister would go, hey, Patty, how you doing? It's like, oh, God, she's the super excited morning, having a cup of joe. Don't expect a lot of common courtesy. On the other hand, are you always like that? So I guess the question that I want you to write down for a moment is, what's your area of greatest weakness? Much like we did with that leadership profile for those of you that were here in the first session, I want you to do a little self-reflection. Of the 7 C's that I described, what is your area of greatest weakness? And then also, how would you improve that? Yeah, it's one thing to say, hey, I'm just really direct. I'm not very courteous. I'll come back to the question I asked you before. Does that work for you? I mean, if you're not a people person, but you're in a people job, something's got to give, folks. And it's much easier to change you than change all of Benning. So what are you going to constructively do to improve? So take a few moments to write that.